You're listening to the Vendor's Daughter podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Calderon, also known as the Vendor's Daughter. I started this podcast about 7 years into working at my family's business. At the time, and really ever since, I've been geeking out on two main topics: self-improvement and business growth and development. I firmly believe that the healthier we are, both mentally and physically, the better we show up for ourselves, our lives, and our businesses. So, on the show, we talk a lot about things like a positive mindset, why what you eat matters, why it's important to move your body, and how a gratitude practice can change your life. And because growing a business is my favorite topic ever, we also interview entrepreneurs from various fields so that they can share how they grew their business. Which means along the way, we'll also talk about things like email list, growing an Instagram, and knowing when it's time to hire your next employee. You guys, the only thing I might like to talk about more than business is coffee. I love coffee. So grab a fresh cup and listen in as we deep dive into all the things. Diann, thank you so much for being on the show with us. For our listeners and our viewers out there, would you mind just introducing yourself?
I'm Diann Wingert. I am an entrepreneurial mindset coach for female solopreneurs who are used to being successful in corporate, nonprofit, or academic environments, but they are dying to get out on their own and maybe a little bit scared to do so.
Gosh, I love that. Well, you're definitely talking to the right crew here. I feel like a lot of the women listening right now are in that exact boat. Before we get into all of the things, how did you find yourself in this coaching position? What were you doing before this? How did you get here?
I've had several careers. My first career was in the fitness industry, and there were just a lot of bonehead dudes back in that time, and I
Still
kind
are.
of got tired of it. I didn't find it intellectually stimulating enough. It was very energetic, and I liked that, but it was not intellectually stimulating enough. So I went into sales, in medical sales, did that for a few years, and then I had a significant event in my life, a car accident that sort of laid me up for a while and left me with a chronic pain condition I've been dealing with for many years now. But that downtime, I had a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe an early midlife crisis. And I thought, well, if I would have died in that accident and it would have been game over, what would I be remembered for? So I did some self awareness work and ended up deciding to go to grad school to become a psychotherapist. I survived a pretty nasty childhood and learned a lot from that. And I thought I could help people. I did that for a great number of years until I realized I really was much more interested in helping people reach their potential than heal from problems.
Mm.
And so I began working with a coach and I realized, oh, that's the difference. Therapy, you're looking back, you're talking about what's not working. Coaching, you're looking forward and you're talking about where you want to be. So I did a couple of years of training in coaching and it turned out to be really good because we decided to leave California and move to Oregon. And I don't know if you know this, but a therapy license is only good for the state you're in. So
Oh,
I was going to have to earn my credentials all over again when I left California. So I sold my practice, put my license on inactive, and I have been coaching online ever since. That's what brought me here.
wow. That's awesome. And what you said there about like therapy is looking to the past and coaching is kind of like reaching your full potential. When I hear that, it's almost like you have to have both. Like you can't, can you, could you, if you're just in this place and you just want to move forward, can you do that and not heal from the past? Or do you still need to do the work of healing the past?
That's a very astute question. I'm really glad you asked it. I am no longer a therapist, but I am a big fan of therapy for the right indications, which are if you need to heal from abuse, work with a therapist. If you need to heal from trauma, if you have a serious mental disorder and you need to learn how to manage it and live well with it, if you have an addiction, um, these are really good indications for therapy. But what I find is that a lot of people who need therapy don't want it.
Mm,
And this is where it's really important to know your boundaries, because coaching has become extremely popular in the last decade.
yeah.
And I think a lot of coaches, well, the majority don't have any mental health training at all. And a lot of coaches are actually attempting to do therapy without any of the training. And that I think is dangerous. So I do think there's a place for both. I believe therapy is for healing and coaching is for growth. Now,
I love that.
ideally, if you need both, get both. And I do an assessment of everyone who wants to work with me that they are actually coachable and that
Mm,
they're ready and that I'm the right person, but that they wouldn't better be served by therapy, because sometimes that's the work you need to do first, and then you can do the growth work. Some people can do both at the same time, but I think that gets a little bit complicated in terms of gaps and overlaps, like you're not wanting to step on the other person's toes. And it's also very demanding emotionally for the client. So I would say usually first is the therapy and then later is the coaching. Here's a real quick way of putting it in perspective. Therapy will take you from terrible to tolerable and tolerable to good. Coaching is to take you from good to great.
ooh, gosh, that's good. That's really
It's a
good.
tweetable, but I'm not on Twitter, so go take
I'm
it.
not on Twitter either. I feel like
No,
it's
it
it's
moves
too
too
much.
fast, It moves too fast. And I'm a fast person, but it's like, well, you turn your head and you've missed everything. So
All of the
I like
things. I feel
Instagram
the
better.
same way. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Well, you were saying you do an assessment to see if the person's even coachable. What makes somebody coachable or what makes someone not coachable?
What makes someone coachable is number one, they know what they want.
Mm,
Number two, they have realistic expectations about what it takes to get there. And three, they understand that it's a very active process. Some people think, and I think there's a lot of celebrity coaches out there that promise people things that are really not at all realistic. Like,
yeah.
especially for your audience, there's a lot of celebrity coaches saying, 6 weeks to six figures or 6 months to everybody is preaching this six figures. And then there's the 7-figure club. And so all these newbie coaches are like, I just need to get to six figures. Why? Why do you need to get to six figures? What is a six-figure lifestyle for you? What are your financial needs that require six figures? Well, I just that's what my coach tells me. No, 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 no. That person, I think, is they see themselves as coachable, but actually they're unrealistic. They're highly motivated, but they're unrealistic and
Mm,
even gullible. So these are the people that get taken advantage of by the huge number of unscrupulous business coaches out there who are making promises to a very receptive audience. And when a newbie coach gets out there and isn't rolling in the cheddar after 6 months, she thinks that she failed. I'm like,
yeah.
no, darling, you just listened to someone who told you what you want to hear and not the truth. So I disappoint people all the time. In fact, I'm not proud of it, but one of my favorite clients calls me the speaker of uncomfortable truth.
Ooh, you should be
And I
proud of
think
that.
I love that. I think it's very accurate but people say you're no BS, you're straight talking. It's like the last thing I want to do is set someone up for unrealistic expectations, because then they will fail and they will either blame me
Hmm.
or themselves. And oftentimes we need a reality adjustment. We need a check that what is actually possible. I got to tell you, this is not what anybody wants to hear. But developing your own business, becoming an online entrepreneur, and being able to support yourself doing something you love is going to be a lot harder and take a lot longer than you think it will. And that's okay. I would never want to go back. I love this lifestyle and I love helping people who also want it, but I will never promise anyone that it's going to be quick or easy, because it won't. In few cases, there are overnight success stories, but usually what appears to be an overnight success story is years in the making, and then it hit a tipping point.
Yeah, that's so real. And I love that you say that because I mean, I have been gullible in the past of the programs. I'm like, oh well, yeah, oh, I'll pay that. Like if that's true in 6 weeks, I can be making X, and then you end the program, and you. Or I'm the type of person who will blame myself for everything. It's no one else's fault. It's always going to be my fault.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, but I did all the work. It's like, well, maybe you did it wrong, or like maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, and then you just feel very gross and taken advantage of, but
Mm-hmm.
also like you're just it just feeds into that negative mindset of like you're not enough, like you're never going to be enough, you're never going to succeed, and then you're supposed to have these six figures at the end of a program and you just have more self-doubt and an empty bank account. So it's just
Yes.
like it's not fun. And so I appreciate someone coming on and saying, hey, it's actually not going to be an overnight success. It's going to take work. It's not going to be glamorous. I think a lot of times, especially with Instagram, as much as I love it, there's this idea that entrepreneurial life is glamorous, and it's like it's really not that glamorous. I spend a lot of my life in this very dark office looking at a computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just like these fancy meals, and there's no private jet in my future, which I wouldn't want anyway. I don't feel like they're that safe, but that's regardless.
No, but it's such a fascinating thing to think about, Jenny, because we are all culturally conditioned to think we know what we want. Like
Mm,
we think, okay, by this stage I should have this, and by that stage I should be that, and this whole idea, we've all been subjected to hundreds of thousands of messages that we should be making six figures and that we all want to be laptop, living the laptop lifestyle and online
mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs. And they make it look so glamorous. They make it look so fun. They make it look so sexy. They make it look so freaking easy.
Yeah.
But we work hard and take a lot of risks, you know, lick a lot of wounds and spend a lot of time feeling afraid,
Yeah.
confused, and full of doubt. And I would never want to talk anyone out of this lifestyle. I just want them to know what they're getting into. I think of it as like informed consent. And I want to be very clear. I would not want to ever work for another person again. And I'm very glad that I was able to make my living this way. But um, I think having realistic expectations is the number one thing I look for, whether someone's coachable by me. Because sometimes people think, I just want you to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And in a first call, when someone says, just tell me what to do, exactly. I'm like, I will do no such thing. How could I possibly know exactly what you should do in your life, in your business? First of all, I don't want that much control or responsibility. And if you're looking to be passive and an entrepreneur, that's an oxymoron. So
Yeah.
this isn't going to work for either of us.
It's so
That's a
real.
hard no for me. And if that sounds harsh, it's like, I don't like wasting people's time or money, nor having mine wasted. And I think if you really want to be self employed and you understand it's not going to happen automatically, but you know this is for you, give yourself the grace, give yourself the space, surround yourself with realistic people,
Mm-hmm.
and just keep going. It's worth
That's
it.
so good. It is so worth it. I'm not fully there yet, but I can see the line of it, and I'm just like it would just be nice to be in complete control of my time, and even if that means working a little bit longer or later, I just love the flexibility. And I think what I've learned recently, and this might be too much of a tangent, but there's a difference between flexibility and freedom. I just kept thinking, "Oh, I want freedom. I want to go do whatever I want to do when I want to do it." But it's like, no, you're still going to need to work. Like you're still going to need to do something to pay the bills that you have right now. But really, flexibility. I kept saying freedom, but what I meant was flexibility. I wanted flexibility to go to the gym class when I wanted to, or go to work from a coffee shop. And so that's been really helpful for me because freedom, although that would be the ultimate goal, that's much further down the line for me. And so knowing that what I really crave is flexibility. I'm like, oh, I can work with that. And it's getting very clear on, okay, you don't need six figures, Jenny. Like you don't need six figures. So what is it that you need and why do you need it? And asking myself, why I want things, and then like doing the deeper level of the why has been really helpful for me recently.
You are
But
well on your way. I can tell you because most people do not realize there is a huge difference between flexibility and freedom. I'm sure that I work as many hours as I would if I was employed by someone
mm-hmm.
else, but I'm doing it my way. I'm an early riser and I'm pretty freaking worthless after like 8 p.m. So I can get up early and get a lot done when it's quiet and dark and all that. But because I get up early, I take a 3 hour break in the middle of the day.
I love that.
I work a split shift. This is my new routine, especially since I'm living in Oregon where now it's winter. So
Mm-hmm.
it's already like pitch dark by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I get up early. I do a sprint of about 4 hours. Then I take a 3 hour break. I have one main meal during that time. I do my email. I do some reading. I listen to a podcast and then I take a nap. I take a
I love
nap
that.
every single day. And I kind of reboot because I've really had a break. I've stepped away from all of it. Then I'm ready to come back for the second sprint for another 3 hours or so. And
Yeah.
I couldn't do that if I worked for someone else. I'm like, can you imagine someone's interviewing you for a job and you're like, can I see the office and does it have a couch? And they're like, no, bye bye. So that's flexibility. Is it
Yes.
freedom? No, because if you work with people, you have human beings as clients,
Mm-hmm.
you have some responsibility and there are expectations. So it's not exactly freedom. I make myself available to my clients both during coaching calls and between on Voxer. So that's not freedom, but I have boundaries. These are the
Mm.
hours that you can reach me, and I promise you'll have a response within 60 minutes. And during these other hours, don't expect to hear from me till the next day. You have to have really good boundaries when you have that much flexibility. Otherwise,
Yes.
you're going to be working all the damn time, right?
All the time. 100%. I'm definitely a recovering non-boundary person, whatever that
Mm,
walk all over me person. And then I went way too hard on boundaries and was like, okay, now you're just kind of being a little much. You know, you're borderline bitchy, which
rigid.
I don't like to say, but like it's kind of what it's become. And so then I was like, okay, we got to find a middle ground here. So definitely in a better place than even like 6 months ago. But I do love the idea of just having that ability to do a split shift. It's like, no, it's not that I'm not going to work. It's just I'm going to work when it makes the most sense for me. And that doesn't necessarily mean from 9 to 5 every day, all day. So I love that. Well, for anybody listening, then they're thinking that they do want to go on this entrepreneurial path. You said, you work with women who have been successful in corporate and now they're thinking of going to this entrepreneurial side, but maybe they're scared. What do you find typically gets in the way of people like actually making that leap?
I refer to the obstacles to making the pivot as the unholy trinity. And I'm
Mm,
referring to, and I apologize in advance for offending any religious people, but the unholy trinity for me is procrastination, perfectionism, and people pleasing. And I
mm,
think because of the way women are culturally conditioned, these things affect almost all of us. There are other nuances like self doubt, buffering, and imposter complex, rejection sensitivity. All of these things usually play some part, but the top three are procrastinating. And listen, I should be completely over all of it. Oh, should isn't doesn't even help. But I took 2 years to launch my podcast, The Driven Woman. 2 years I was getting ready to launch my podcast. All of that was just nonsense. All of that was an elaborate procrastination schema that had me completely fooled the whole time, thinking I was getting ready, reading books about launching a podcast, listening to podcasts about launching a podcast. I literally had all the equipment, the show art, the URL. I mean, I had everything I needed. I had hired 2 different podcast launch coaches, and I still hadn't launched. So that level of procrastination might be extreme for some, but barely getting started for others. I see that across the board. Perfectionism, whatever we do, we have to do perfectly. I mean, you can only tweak a logo so much, but I've
That
seen
is true.
women spend like months and months and months. I once had a woman hire me she said, "Can I just hire you for one session?" I don't do one offs anymore, but at that time she wanted to hire me for one session. I'm like, okay, what do you think we can do in one session? She had already written a book. She already had like 50 different blog posts. She had a beautiful website and loads of experience. She wanted me to coach her for 1 hour with one conclusion, one result: press publish on the frickin' website.
No.
I was like, whoa. Just when I think I've seen the most extreme case of perfectionism and procrastination, I'm like, and I realize, and you know who is afflicted by this the most? It's not the dumbasses and the what I call shamelessly self-promoting know nothings. It is the most intelligent, most gifted, most hardworking, most talented, most creative. These are the women who get crippled by the unholy trinity of procrastination, perfectionism, and people pleasing. The ones who are out there, look at me, listen to me, buy from me, hire me, usually can't find their ass with both hands in a rearview mirror, but they have one thing that the rest of us don't have, and that's the ability to say, I'm the real deal, even if it's the farthest thing from the truth. So I'm like, this is some seriously messed up stuff. Like, the people who really can help are too afraid to push publish, while those who hardly know anything are jumping up and waving and dancing and lip syncing all over TikTok, and people are can't wait to give them their credit card. I'm like, we have to do something about this. We have to narrow the gap, don't you think?
Oh, 100%. But I guess my thought is, well, why is that? Why are the most qualified people the ones that are most afraid, whereas the idiots are just out there pushing publish all day long?
I think the main problem with being a ding dong is that you don't know you are one.
Ooh,
I
that's
think
real.
that the people who are what I call, my husband and I have this term SSP, shamelessly self promoting. Whenever we see someone who's SSP, and we say to each other, SSP. But generally speaking, they don't know that they're obnoxious. They don't know that they're unqualified. They don't know that they really don't have much to offer. They are just extremely comfortable getting attention.
Yeah.
And I think the more you develop yourself, the harder it is to make those bids for attention, because it
Mm,
seems like you don't want to be perceived as a dingling. So I think what I like to think about is narrowing the gap between being shamelessly self promoting and being the best kept secret. Because if you're the best kept secret, like, you are bomb at what you do, but nobody knows you, you're not
yes.
going to survive in business. I think it's one of the things I most enjoy doing is helping women overcome the procrastination, the perfectionism, and the people pleasing, and get comfortable being visible, declaring their value, and
Mhm.
asking for the sale, for the hire, for the whatever. We really have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
And I've never met a highly qualified woman who doesn't. Logically speaking, it makes zero sense. You're thinking you're insecure, but it's across the board. So instead of thinking there's something wrong with me that I think this way, just assume that if I have imposter complex, that is proof that I'm highly qualified. Now we just have to fix your mindset.
Gosh, I love that. And I love that you mentioned the mindset of things because my husband and I were actually just talking about this morning with the podcast editing side of things. Because I fall into all of those things, especially the perfectionism and the people pleasing. And I was literally sitting on my recliner this morning because he does not struggle with those things at all. And
So
in the pot,
unfair.
so unfair.
So
It's
unfair.
so fucked up. And so in the podcast editing business that we're doing together, there's been customers of mine that I've had for a long time, but I am that perfectionist. Like I know what they like. Like I know that when I hand it over to them, they're going to be happy. And like the idea that they might not be happy with an end product, like if I just hand it over to him knowing he does great work, but like he doesn't like get paralyzed around it. I don't know. He doesn't have like this emotional thing to it. He just does it and moves it on. I'm like, what if they don't like the way that you do it? And then but it comes back to like it's like mortification inside of me where I just like I get nauseous thinking about it. And I was like, I don't understand. Like it's so frustrating but all of that I'm like, well, that's going to keep if you feel that way, like if you can never trust anybody to edit another podcast, if you're the only one, then you have no business. Like there's only so much time
You don't
in
have
a
a business
day.
that can scale, that's for sure.
You do not that one. I mean, it would literally require me to be at my desk all day every day, and that's not really the life that I envisioned. And so I was literally on my recliner saying, I think I need to go. I have a therapist I meet with, and I was like, I think I need to go meet with Candace and like talk to Candace about what this perfectionism and ultimately this people pleasing thing is inside of me. I was like, my income's not dependent on it. My house doesn't depend on this. Like, whether or not they like me doesn't determine my value, but something inside me I feel is very broken. So I just like that you said, hey, this is actually not, you're not a total loser, Jenny. So thank
No,
you.
as a matter of fact, far from it. And actually it's normal. I think all high functioning women have these issues. I also think a couple of other things I'm going to run by you and get your
Yeah.
reaction. One is I think that we believe that we have high standards
Mm.
and we do not understand that it's like up to a point you have high standards. Like, if you were an A student and you got butthurt that you didn't have an A plus,
Yeah.
right? But the reason is because you wanted to get into an Ivy League school and you knew the only people that got into the Ivy League school have a GPA of 4.2.
Mm.
That's one thing. But not being able to feel okay about who you are unless you have that A plus across the board, even though you have no intention of going to grad school, that is, I think, because we lose sight of the distinction between having high standards and being a perfectionist. I
Mm.
was blindsided by this myself. I thought I have high standards. I'm an A student. I'm an alpha. I'm an overachiever. I'm all these things, which I don't have any problem identifying with. But I did not identify with a perfectionist until someone told me. I said, I'm not a perfectionist. You should see my house. Like my dogs haven't had their nails clipped forever. I haven't shaved my legs in 2 weeks. I there's dust everywhere. Like, I could just give them all the evidence of why I'm not a perfectionist because I don't have the picture perfect life.
Mm.
So that is proof I'm not a perfectionist. And then the coach said, Diann, that's not what being a perfectionist is. The fact that you don't have the perfect life, the perfect house, the perfect, website, all the things. It's the fact that you think you should and you suffer because you don't. And I was like,
Ooh.
oops. And I'm like, how did I get to this age and not understand that? But
I
then
feel
I'm
like
like,
that's a mic drop moment. That's
oh,
like,
right. That's a mic
yeah.
drop moment. But it's like, it's that you think it's possible. You think someone out there is achieving it and you suffer because it's not you. And I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, in that case, hand raised.
Yeah.
So the real thing here is if your perfectionism stops you from pressing publish, if your perfectionism has you putting 10 hours into editing a podcast episode, but you're only able to charge the client for 4 hours
Yeah.
because you know you're being excessive, then you have just given yourself a deep pay cut. And so I've had a coach that I worked with in the past would tell everyone in our program, do B work, do
Mm.
B minus work, do C plus work. I've also heard other coaches say, just ship it. Just ship it, meaning don't fuss over it. Don't try to make it perfect. Don't try to make it be the best it can be. Just ship it. Because in their minds, the only way to win at the entrepreneurial game is to be the first, to get it out there, to get it out there
Mm.
fast, and don't fuss over it too much. But I'll tell you what, when I read an otherwise impressive blog post and there's a bunch of typos in there,
Mm-hmm.
that just bugs the shit out of me. I find that very distracting. And I do think that person is being careless, or they've hired an assistant who's being careless and they're not supervising them. So I don't think I would ever want to ascribe to this. I'm proud of doing B minus work. I don't think
Mm.
that's good advice for people who actually have perfectionism. I think that what actually works, and I'll give you an example of what I teach my clients. Work expands to fill the time allotted.
Yeah.
So if you say, I want to do a deep edit on this podcast episode because I want my client to be delighted with the
Mm-hmm.
outcome, I want them to think I am the best podcast editor they could have possibly hired. I want them to be so happy that I will feel pride, and my self-esteem cup will be filled to the brim. That is a very slippery slope, Jenny, because when we put that much power in the hands of others, I call that outsourcing your self esteem.
Ooh, that's
I
good.
do not outsource. There's another mic drop for you. I do not outsource my self esteem because I do not want to put the way I feel about myself and the work that I do in the hands of other people. Because when they love me, I love me.
Mm.
But when they don't, I'm like going down the shame spiral.
Yeah.
So I don't want to live that way. What I do instead of thinking, I'm just going to keep working on this thing until it meets my standards, that could be for fuck ever. Like I'll
Right.
never, it can always be just a little bit better. And I just keep
Mm-hmm.
tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. And meanwhile, now you're working for chump change because you're spending so much time on everything. What I do now and what I teach my clients to do is, let's decide what the value of this task is. In your case, editing a podcast episode. How much can you actually charge for this? How much is that paying you per hour? And remember, as a self employed person, you got to factor in taxes and overhead and other things. Based on my income goals, my revenue goals, how much time can I actually take to edit this episode, given
Mm.
what I'm going to be able to charge for it, the value exchange, time for money. And then you have to find a way to make it fit. You don't just keep working on something until you feel satisfied, because if you're a perfectionist, you're never going to get there. Now
Yeah.
I say, I have 1 hour to complete this task. I set a timer. I set a countdown timer so I realize when it's like 15 minutes left, and I make it fit just like it was a timed test in college, because that's something I know how to do. And instead of just working on something endlessly, I decide ahead of time, how much value does this task have and how much time can I allocate to it? And whatever it is at the end of that time, I have decided ahead of time it's enough. It changes
Gosh.
everything when you do it that way, really.
I can feel that in like my bones. That feels so freeing, and it's just like it's practical. I'm so glad you didn't come here and say like, just like really do some meditation in the morning, and you'll get over perfectionism. I'm like, no, that's like a real. That's like
It's a
that's like
lifelong affliction. Trust me, I know.
yes, I feel like I'm like if I could just be over it, I would I
Mm.
think I could just like be over it. And so to say, okay, like this is something that is part of you, but you don't have to be like subject to torture by it. You can there's a very practical workaround. Like I understand math. I understand like how much I want to get paid an hour. I understand like the bottom line of like I understand all of those. And so to give something that's very tangible and realistic and just actionable, like set a timer, I'm like, oh, actually that's genius. Okay, I can do that. And so I'm just like, and then just make yourself stick to it. And that's actually
And that
such
takes
good
a little
advice.
practice.
Yes,
That
I was
takes a
going to
little
say that.
practice because we are accustomed to telling ourselves we're going to do something and then not doing it and then just
Mm-hmm.
accepting that we disappoint ourselves. We don't disappoint others, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We disappoint ourselves over and over and over. And then that becomes so habitual that we just get a little flinch of, oh, here I go again, but we don't do anything about it. When you have external things, like I have a little timer cube here,
Oh, good.
when you have external things, it helps to take a little bit of the emotionality out of it. One of the things I think about is that there is math and there is drama.
Mm.
When I am caught up in my perfectionism and I'm thinking, well, this isn't good enough and I need to make this better. And, Amy Porterfield's show notes have a lot more than mine and whatever. But if I get caught up in that, that is all drama, 100% drama.
Mm.
The math is the value of what I can charge for this task requires me to limit it to 1 hour. There's no drama there. There's no room for
No
drama,
drama.
pure math. So you get out of the nonsense that we get into in our head, which is actually very stimulating. And there's a part of it we like. One last comment I want to make on the perfectionism.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why it's a hard habit to break is because it's part of our identity.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we kind of like, I know it's not good for me. I know that like being a perfectionist causes me to suffer. But it reminds me of that question that they used to ask. Maybe they still do. I haven't applied for a job for a really long time. In an interview, tell me one of your weaknesses. And people always say, well, I guess I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a weakness that isn't really a weakness because you're basically saying you can exploit the hell out of me. And so I guess think we are a little bit proud of being perfectionists because I think it implies that we really care a lot,
Mm-hmm.
that we are dedicated and have high standards. And those things are true and they are an important part of our identity. The perfectionism is the not being able to know when enough is enough.
Yeah, it goes back to the boundaries. I love
Mm-hmm.
it so much. Gosh, Diann, I have loved this and I would just take up all of your time if I could. But for people like me who want more, how do they work with you? Where can they find you? All of the things.
Yes. I already have an established presence on Facebook and LinkedIn, but I am growing my audience on Instagram. So I would love, love, love it if you would follow me there on Instagram at Coach Diann Wingert. And I do have a funky spelling, Diann. So Coach Diann Wingert on Instagram. If you like the sound of my voice and what I have to say with it, you should definitely check out the Driven Woman podcast. There's a very cool picture of me in my pre-COVID body, flexing my bicep in a sleeveless top. I think I look freaking awesome there.
You do
Trust
look
me, I don't
awesome.
look
You
like
look
that way
awesome
right
here
now.
too. You
It's a
look
great
awesome.
picture. And I'll make sure that you have a link to a freebie that they can get about moving past your limiting beliefs, because that's a huge part of what I do. And if you get that, you'll be on my mailing list. And then you will hear from me regularly until you say enough and unsubscribe. How's that sound?
Never say that sounds perfect, but no one's going to
Awesome.
unsubscribe. Never enough. Hey guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, which I hope you did, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss what's next. If you really enjoyed it, I'd be super grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes or anywhere that you listen. And if you really enjoyed it, then I'd love if you'd share it with a friend. Last but not least, make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Vendor's Daughter for a behind-the-scenes look at my personal and professional life, and for what I hope is a little bit of daily inspiration as we walk this crazy journey together.